I'd like to tell you a story about a dear friend of mine. His name is George. People will often ask, how do you get started in magic? How do you grow as a magician? One of the best ways I know is to find someone who's doing it and study under that person. For me, it was a fellow named George Dency. Now, George was a Hungarian immigrant. When he first came to this country many years ago, he had a wife and 2 small children and no job. So day after day, George would go out looking for work. As fate would have it, the only job that George could find was working in a spaghetti factory, where it was his job to cut the noodles evenly. Now, George was a great magician, but he was a terrible spaghetti cutter because, you see, George was a little bit cross-eyed. So what George would do, he'd cut some of the strands like this one right here, really, really long. He'd cut other strands like this one right here, really, really short, and he'd cut still others like this one right here, somewhere in between, which is where they all should have been cut. Now, this went on for many months, and George's boss got a little bit aggravated with him, said, George, if you can't learn to cut spaghetti straight, I'm going to have to let you go. Now, George, of course, couldn't afford to lose his job, so he decided to use his magic on his boss. Whereupon, George gathered the ends of the spaghetti in his hands like this, and he began to pull. And as he did, a wonderful thing took place, because you see, those spaghetti strands that had once been of different lengths suddenly became all the same length. George said, you see, I've got one strand of spaghetti which is equal to this strand, which is equal to this strand right here, 3 equal strands of spaghetti. Now, this was good enough, of course, to fool George's boss, and George was able to keep his job. But when people would go to the grocery store to buy George's spaghetti, what they would find is that some of the strands were cut really, really long, other strands were cut really short, and still others were cut exactly as they should be.